Alright, so let's start this video off with a question for the comment section. Who here loves chicken? Fried, grilled, seasoned with 11 herbs and spices, or even bits of it in a soup with a side of crackers and a Sprite, made fresh by your mom because it's 2005, you're homesick from school, and you're just taking it easy and watching The Price is Right on the couch. All of those, trust me, are fair ways to enjoy chicken. But today we are talking about the most majestic chicken of all, and this one's not even cooked. And that, of course, is Ho-Oh. And yeah, I know that a lot of Ho-Oh's inspiration actually comes from Mythical Phoenix and all that, but take a close look at this thing and consider this. If you ever encountered this Pokemon in real life, it would probably cluck at you. So with that in mind, this is Master Trainer, I'm James, and today's video we're going over 5 things you probably didn't know about Pokemon number 250, Ho-Oh. Number 1. As mentioned before, Ho-Oh's design is basically a mix between a phoenix and a chicken. However, the phoenix inspirations in particular come from 2 different places. Part of this inspiration, along with the inspiration for Ho-Oh's legend, comes from an ancient legend from Osaka. For those who haven't heard it, the legend of Ho-Oh, as told in-game basically, involves the Brass Tower in Ecruteak City burning down 3 Pokemon, rumored to be the evolutions of Jolteon, Flareon, Vaporeon, being caught up in the blaze. However, through its special move Sacred Fire, Ho-Oh is said to be able to raise the dead, and in this case, that's exactly what happened. As such, the 3 Pokemon that were killed were respectively revived by Ho-Oh as legendary Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. In the Osakan myth, depending on the version being told, it is said that a massive pagoda was once burned to the ground in ancient times, with the blaze either being caused by a lightning strike in a massive storm, or by advancing forces during a deadly war. However, from the ashes of the pagoda came a mighty phoenix, born from the charred remains. If this myth is to be further interpreted in the storm context, it can also be believed that the other major gold and silver legendary Pokemon, Lugia, could be representative of the storm itself, though that might be a bit of a stretch. The other myth that inspired Ho-Oh's origins comes from ancient China. This myth tells of an immortal phoenix called the Feng Guang, which, depending on how and who was using it, represented loyalty, honesty, and power sent from the heavens. In particular, the coloration of Ho-Oh's shiny form takes inspiration from a very popular depiction of the Feng Guang. Number 2. Now let's talk about Ho-Oh's special move, Sacred Fire. As mentioned before, this attack is said to be able to revive the dead. However, in-game, it is merely a move with 100 power, 95% accuracy, and a 50% chance of burning whatever target it's used on. It's also considered a physical move, despite it never involving Ho-Oh ever making contact with its target. In fact, depending on the depiction of the move, the fire itself will either come from Ho-Oh's mouth or be generated by its wings. What makes this move particularly special, though, is the fact that it's become notably less special over time. As of Gen 6, the Pokemon Entei can also learn Sacred Fire. And now, along with this making Entei potentially more interesting, not to say it wasn't already a fascinating Pokemon, this change also made Ho-Oh the only legendary Pokemon in history to have ever had its exclusive move become non-exclusive. Number 3. Now let's talk about one of the coolest sounding phrases in Pokemon nerdom, Trio Masters. Usually when a trio of legendary Pokemon is introduced, there's either one of them that's quite obviously the master of the trio, or a secret 4th legendary that rules all 3. Examples of this can be Rayquaza being the master of Groudon and Kyogre, Arceus having birthed Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, and in Gen 7, Necrozma being a master of sorts for Solgaleo and Lunala. However, the only gens that I'm not sure introduces legendaries with a proper master are Gens 1 and 8. This especially goes for Gen 8, as I'm not sure if Eternatus is considered a trio master with the big doggos or not. Anyways, this idea gets really weird and interesting when we look at Gen 2. Now, instead of introducing a trio of main legendaries, in Pokemon Gold and Silver, we just got 2, Ho-Oh and Lugia. But along with them, we also got a new minor trio, in the form of Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. However, both Lugia and Ho-Oh, canonically speaking, are, in fact, trio masters. What the trio that Ho-Oh rules over, though, well, that gets a bit complicated. Now for Lugia, it's easy. As can be seen both through interviews and pieces of media such as the second Pokemon movie, it's the master of the legendary birds from Gen 1. Then, if we're just going off the previously mentioned legend, it seems that Ho-Oh should in turn just be the master of the legendary beasts. But again, depending on the source, that might not be the case. According to some sources, both Lugia and Ho-Oh are masters of legendary birds, and as for the beasts, depending on the source, they either all act independently or are led by Suicune. Granted, the best justification I can find for that latter theory is the fact that Suicune was the cover mascot for Pokemon Crystal version and had an entire subplot involving it in that game. Which one of these theories is canon? Well, honestly, I'm unsure. With that said though, if you want my opinion, I'd think I'd go with the whole thing involving Lugia ruling the birds and Ho-Oh ruling the beast trio, just based off my prior research and I guess headcanon. Sure, let's go with that. Number 4. So after that last beast of a fact, see what I did there? Here's a simpler one. So believe it or not, Ho-Oh was actually the first Gen 2 Pokemon to ever be revealed, appearing at the end of the very first episode of the Pokemon anime. But also, let's be honest, I think most people who've researched into the series even a little bit know that fact. What many newer Pokemon fans may not know though, all the theories that existed about this mysterious rainbow Pokemon for years before it was officially, well, confirmed. Now, before Ho-Oh was officially announced, apparently some people thought that this weird rainbow Pokemon was Moltres, though I do believe that that was later debunked and was confirmed to actually be Ho-Oh. And with that came the speculation that this scene would someday be revisited and that Ho-Oh would finally be given its own dedicated Pokemon movie, just like Lugia. But, of course, at the time when these theories were coming out, the world was a simpler place, and we didn't realize that those behind the Pokemon anime really did not care about continuity or revisiting old plot threads. Speaking of theories, did anyone catch the dumped playable versions of the Pokemon Gold and Silver Space World demos from a few years back? Notice that the title screen on here just displays Ho-Oh and not Lugia or Celebi or anything. Perhaps there is going to be a new trio of legendaries, with Ho-Oh actually serving as a trio master. Or perhaps Ho-Oh was just planned to be Gold and Silver's equivalent to Mewtwo, being a post-game legendary that could just be found in either game locked deep in some sort of cave. Who knows? I mean, in those Space World demos, Johto looked like the entirety of Japan flipped on its side. The possibilities are endless for what could have been. Number 5. Okay, now here's actually a really simple and fun fact to end off. You know Veronica Taylor, the original voice of Ash Ketchum? Yeah, apparently Ho-Oh is one of her favorite Pokemon. Neat! But anyways, that's it for this video on the mythical Ho-Oh. What Pokemon shall I cover in the future? What's your favorite Pokemon region? Let me know in the comments below. So with that, remember to subscribe to Master Trainer, and I'll see you next time.